Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to be sculpting some nostalgic Pop-Tart charms out of polymer clay. And all in all, we're going to be making a strawberry, s'mores, wild berry, hot fudge sundae, cherry, and Oreo Pop-Tart. The materials you're going to need in order to make these charms are polymer clay, and I'm going to be using Sculpey Premo for this, a pasta machine or a rolling pin, a clay extruder including the disc with the tiny hole, clear liquid clay, white Sculpey for the frosting, soft pastels to color the clay and the liquid, a Scribe Tool and a dotting tool, a rectangular cutter, a circle cutter, clay sprinkles, a texturing tool, and some eye pins. I'm also going to be linking all of the supplies in the description box. So firstly, we're going to be sculpting the basic pastry shapes for each Pop-Tart flavor. And I'm going to start with the Pop-Tarts that have the classic pastry look that includes the strawberry, wild berry, and cherry Pop-Tarts. For this clay, I mixed Sculpey ecru polymer clay as well as the white together. And either by using your pasta machine or your rolling pin, you're going to flatten the clay into a thin layer, then cut out 6 rectangles. This layer needs to be thin because we're going to add the red filling, and then add the second pastry layer on top of it. So for the red filling, you're going to flatten a layer of red clay, and then cut out a rectangle slightly smaller than your pastry. Once you add the filling, you can now add the other pastry rectangle on top of it. And I'm just pinching the edges down to form the shape of the pastry. Once you're satisfied with the look, you can cut out a bite in the corner using a circle cutter. And now I'm going to be using my dotting tool just to spread the filling out a bit more. Now you may set the berry flavors to the side while we work on sculpting the other 3 flavors. For the s'mores Pop-Tart, I'm going to be using a crew colored clay. For the hot fudge, I'm going to be using a mixture of burnt sienna clay and burnt umber clay. And for the Oreo Pop-Tart, I'm going to be using a mixture of black and burnt sienna clay. Now, the process of these 3 will not require adding the filling with clay. We're just going to sculpt the pastry using a thick layer of clay and then cutting out 1 rectangle per flavor. You're going to sculpt and shape the edges by pressing down on the sides, and then cut out the bite only for the s'mores and the Oreo one. We still need to wait to cut out the bite for the hot fudge Pop-Tart because we have to add the frosting first. And before adding frosting or filling details, we must texture the Pop-Tarts. I'm going to use a toothbrush, and I just use this for my clay projects to texture all the sides for each Pop-Tart. Then I'm going to use my tiny dotting tool to poke holes along the edges. Now we still need to shade the lighter colored Pop-Tarts, and I'm just going to be brushing on beige, yellow, and brown soft pastels along the edges of the pastries. And once that's done, we can now insert the eye pins. I'm going to be using eye pin screws for this, and I always twist it into the clay until all you can see is the hook. Now before we start the baking process, there are just a couple of things we need to do for just some of the specific Pop-Tart flavors. But for right now, you could go ahead and place the s'mores Pop-Tart onto the baking sheet while we work on the other ones. And we're going to focus right now on the wild berry and hot fudge flavors for this moment in time, since the frosting for these have to go on the clay pastry before it is hardened in the oven. For the wild berry Pop-Tart, I'm going to be using purple clay to cut out a thin rectangle that's a bit smaller than the size of the pastry. I'm also going to be doing the same thing for the hot fudge sundae, except with white clay. Now I'm going to use a clay extruder to create some strips of clay for the stripes of these Pop-Tarts. Now you may just use your hands for this if you'd like, but I'm going to be using an extruder since it's much easier. And for the wild berry, I'm going to be using bright blue clay, and for the hot fudge sundae, I'm going to be using dark brown. For the wild berry, the squiggle is a bit more loose compared to the squiggles on the hot fudge sundae one. And for the hot fudge, we need to add some sprinkles, so I'm going to be using a variety of clay colors for the sprinkles, and then I'm going to be slicing them up using my blade. Once they're done, you can go ahead and place them on the baking sheet along with the s'mores flavor, but hold on tight before we bake all of them in the oven because we still need to work on some details for the other flavors. Because for the strawberry Oreo and cherry Pop-Tart, sprinkles are required, so we need to make sure to bake these strips in the oven before chopping them up. Now I've already created a batch of rainbow sprinkles for the strawberry Pop-Tart, but I'm going to be showing you how you can do it for the cherry and Oreo flavors. So for the cherry sprinkles, I'm going to be extruding a very thin strip of red clay, and I'm going to leave it as is to bake in the oven. We will chop it up after it is hardened in the oven. And the same goes for the Oreo sprinkles, except I'm going to be using dark brown clay as the color. Once you've created the strips, we're going to go ahead and add the filling for the Pop-Tarts that don't have filling in them yet. For the hot fudge sundae and the Oreo Pop-Tarts, I'm going to be using white liquid Sculpey. And for the s'mores, just for right now, I'm going to be using white Sculpey to add the marshmallow part of the filling. Now we can finally bake these in the oven at 275 degrees for 20 minutes. We will be using the oven again very soon for some of these charms. And once it's out the oven and cooled off, we're going to be going ahead and chopping up the sprinkles for the cherry, Oreo, and strawberry tarts. I'm going to be using my blade to chop it up until it's very fine. Now let's go ahead and start mixing the frosting colors as well as the chocolate filling for the s'mores tart. I will only be using the clear liquid clay for the chocolate filling, and for the rest I will be using liquid white Sculpey and soft pastels. And for the frosting of the s'mores, I'm mixing some brown soft pastels into liquid Sculpey. And for the cherry Pop-Tart, I'm going to be using a mix of white liquid Sculpey and red soft pastels, and I'm just shaving this into the clay mixture. And then I'm going to frost the top of the Oreo, strawberry, and cherry Pop-Tarts using the proper icing and sprinkles that we have created. And once you have decorated everything, you can go ahead and pop them back in the oven at 275 degrees for another 15 minutes. This is besides the wild berry though, we had already finished it. Well, I hope this tutorial was helpful for somebody. I loved making these Pop-Tart charms, and I hope you did too. Feel free to check out the other tutorials in this playlist if you're looking for more clay ideas. Thanks for watching everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye!